Are you ready to embark with me on another composition adventure today? I hope you are. If you don't know me, hi, my name is Marie-Noëlle. I'm a full-time artist and illustrator, also top teacher on Skillshare, and I also have a Patreon called My Cozy Little Art Cafe, where I do live drawing sessions, sketchbook tours, and process videos. Today, I wanted us to embark on another composition bonus exercise, and the reason I say bonus exercise is because I have an in-depth class on Skillshare called Art Composition Fundamentals, exploring value, contrast, shape, and balance in Procreate or pen and ink. So I guess you'll know that I'm yet again partnered with Skillshare, which I'm very happy to be partnered with today, in order to give you this bonus exercise. The class itself is a class where we really try to deep dive into these principles of composition so that you can better understand how it is that you can create powerful artwork that you want to create. We approach it in a very hands-on manner, first by looking at master studies and breaking down some of the principles of what it is that they're doing that makes their artwork so good and so powerful. We also get into creating our own compositions and exploring with notions of distribution and negative space. And then finally, we do a project where, using different references, we explore iterations on composition, applying everything that we've learned in the class until then. So I hope that you join the class because it's been very fun seeing everybody's beautiful projects and the incredible creative ways that you're implementing these principles. So let me just mention what Skillshare is if you don't know what it is. It's a platform where there are thousands of classes that are taught by industry professionals and experts in their fields in order to empower you with the tools and techniques that will help you on your own creative journey. So of course, there are many classes in the categories of art and illustration, but also animation, design, 3D art, and many more. So whether you're just starting out or have been doing creative endeavors for a long time, but maybe need a little extra boost and extra motivation, Skillshare is a wonderful platform to do that. And I do hope to see you there because I have a bunch of classes there. I think now it's maybe in the 20s or something, maybe I have 20 classes. And of course, the first 500 people to use my link in the description or scan the QR code will receive a 1-month free trial to Skillshare Premium. So I hope you join us and get started today. Okay, so obviously in my class, we really go in depth into a lot of these principles, but today I just wanted to give us a fun bonus exercise on composition, which you can take before the class or after, or just do this and my other YouTube videos as well. What we're going to be doing is looking at the connection between art composition and our inner critic. And I know that might seem confusing, how do those connect? But I hope you'll join me. Grab your sketchbook. We're going to be working in black and white, of course, because that's very useful in composition and ties in nicely with, the class that I was mentioning. So let's get started, open up our sketchbooks, and do some drawing. All right, so hopefully you've grabbed a sketchbook and maybe a tool. I'm going to be using an alcohol marker, but you could also use, a graphite pencil or something else that is just black or in that realm. And some of you might remember that we did my video called The Power of Ugly Art, where we did a few different things, but one of them was talking about expectations around our art practice and kind of representing them visually. So today I want to do something similar, but a little bit more precisely about composition. So obviously composition is a vast subject. It's got a lot of moving parts to it, and I find that it's often one of the most tricky subjects for a lot of artists and illustrators. So I want us to start off just by writing down what negative beliefs you might have around composition. So what does your inner critic say about your capacity or skill for composing images? I'm going to do 2 of them, but you could do more. And the first one that I'm going to do is one that I think visited me definitely over the past, year. And it would be, I'll never know how to create complex compositions. That's one of them. I will say that because I've had a lot of practice dealing with my inner critic, even though this is a thought that has visited me, it hasn't stopped me from trying things or working at it, and I actually, another part of me knows that I can get there at some point. But that being said, it still has visited me. So I want to write it down, and then maybe I'll have one more, and I'm just going to do one that's more general and maybe that some of you will relate to. I don't think it's one that I fully identify with at this moment, but I'm still going to do it because it's going to be fun for our exercise. I suck at composition. This is really kind of overarching, just like a big generalization about my skill in this realm. All right, we're going to actually create compositions related to these sentences that our inner critic believes, whether partially or fully. We're going to create just a few rectangles, and I'm going to actually create one over here. It's either mid-size, and I'm not being too perfectionistic about it. What if I did one that was like a slightly different composition? Because that's fine, like a slightly different ratio. And so I'm gonna use these two for this one, and then these two for this one, all right? But we're gonna start with our first one. Hopefully you've landed on your very own inner critic's way of bashing your composition skills. And I want you to think of what shape would this sentence or this feeling be if you represented it visually. So for me, I'll never know how to create complex compositions. There's something very heavy about it. So I'm gonna write down heavy. There's something also a little bit isolating. Those are the first two words that come to mind. So how would I represent heaviness just using shapes? My first idea is, okay, well, maybe I would have like a big dark shape kind of hovering as though it was gonna crush me, if you want. Like that's kind of that feeling of heaviness. But obviously I would have to include something that is getting crushed, so maybe it would be me, but I'm not going to do a person because we really just want to play with shapes here. But maybe I can just do a shape that would be kind of representative of that. So like I could just do like a little, like this looks kind of scary as though it's going to get crushed. But I will say here, that shape kind of makes me think of a mountain range. So I'm not going to leave it like that. I'm going to kind of straighten it, I think. And maybe I'm going to bring it even closer to that little shape, so it's almost like touching it. And this kind of matches the isolating feeling. You know, I could even, if I wanted to, just increase that by making it kind of like almost going all the way around, like it's a tiny little space, something that is like that. So that's how I would represent it, maybe in a shape. But okay, I've done it with one, but why don't we explore it another? Because the thing is that there are many different ways that we can represent feelings or emotions or sentences. It really depends on kind of the angle that you're taking. So I don't know, there's something, I'll never know how to create complex compositions. There's something in the complexity. So what if I had a lot of different shapes, but there's something a little bit aggressive about it? So I could maybe make sort of spiky shapes, but maybe I'd have multiple spiky shapes. And there's something that kind of feels overwhelming, confusing. So maybe I would keep some of these jagged edges, and then maybe I would put, I don't know, just another one of these tiny little things getting crushed. And what if I did lines that were coming down? I don't know, something like that. Maybe I would make this one bigger. That's going to be my second version. And of course, I'm only doing 2 here, but you could do this, 4 or 5 times and try to refine and see if there's like some types of shapes that feel more resonant with the sentence that you're creating. I feel like between the two, this one is the one that feels the most like this, but it's good to continue experimenting because sometimes it allows you to visit something else. I'm not super satisfied with this one, which is fine. That's the point. This is really just an experiment to try different things out. And so what if I actually did a third one and I tried to lean into one of the aspects of this one that I like? For example, I find that, I don't know, it's kind of like they're equally distributed, these different shapes, but I do like the spikiness. So what if I have just more spikiness, something like really spiky? And so what if I had just a few more just spiky shapes. And again, maybe just someone, I say someone, but just some element that feels kind of floating and disconnected, because it's true that there's some form of disconnection in this feeling as well, like disconnected from my capacity, disconnected from hope, disconnected from action. What if I crossed and overlapped some spikiness? And I wish I could go even thinner, so I'm going to do that. Something like that, to me, feels a little bit better than this one. So do you see how sometimes if you lean into something, you can maybe get to something that you feel represents it a little bit better. Okay, let's do the second one. I'm going to say I suck at composition. And that's really like an overarching kind of aggressive thing. There's something about it that kind of reminds me of this, but I'm gonna, I don't know, like almost like a prison. What if there was something like that? Like kind of like a prison thing going on, but then something also pretty heavy that is just above a tiny little thing. I don't know, that could be one. Or what if I just did something that almost fills the entirety, and actually I'm going to switch to this side so that there's more of this like white space. Something that's really all-encompassing, because I suck at composition. There's like no room for growth in that sentence at all. There's no room for learning. It's just a solid truth that is quite heavy and negative, right? But rather than having something like this, which I did over here, I wanted to kind of emphasize this sort of, I don't know, this aggressive quality. That's why I'm deciding to leave a little bit more of that white space so that it really looks like a scribble more than anything. All right. So now I want you to look at the different compositions that you did and assess, just like we did kind of for this one. This one I really like kind of the prison-like. There's also a heaviness here with this big shape. There's also a sense of isolation. And then this one to me feels very aggressive and kind of all-encompassing. I think that's the biggest, no light, which is interesting to me because I don't know, maybe you would disagree with this, but I feel like this is no light, even though I've left white spaces, just because of the aggressiveness of the scribble. Okay, so let's write down these things also for our other ones. This one I feel is really good with that heaviness, also the isolation. I think that one really nailed those two words. And then there's also something that is no space. I don't know, there's a sense of no space. Like you can't move anywhere, you can't go anywhere. This one has a little bit more, I would say something chaotic, aggressive, but I also would call it a bit confusing because I'm not sure what's going on here or where I'm supposed to look. That would be my assessment for this one. And this one feels very like pointed aggression, which I guess play on words. Yeah, it's literally I'm pointing aggressively towards something, towards an element. But I just mean like it feels like a very specific type of aggression that is centered on this shape here. There's something that is fear-based in this one to me. And then now as I think of it, I actually want to modify it. And so yeah, if you feel like modifying any of your compositions at any point, feel free. I don't know if this is going to work, but I was just thinking like, what if I cut off this part on the right? How would that feel? Yeah, to me that feels even more kind of there's nowhere to go. All right, so we've spent a lot of time here visiting our inner critic and kind of trying to represent some of our inner critic's beliefs in visual form. And what I'm interested in, and this is where I think it really connects with composition, is that in doing this, in trying to represent our inner critic's beliefs, what are you doing? You're actually learning how shapes connect to mood. How is it that I can, without having any individual character, recognizable element, evoke something very strong as I suck at composition or I'll never know how to create complex compositions. And You might have some that are more successful than others, but isn't that fascinating that just in doing that exercise, you're able to learn how shapes work and how shapes carry this sort of abstract meaning to it that we can all kind of understand. So this one, for example, you wouldn't necessarily know what sentence it was that initiated this if I didn't tell you. It could be something else. It could be something like, my life is useless, or I'm very lonely. And I think that would also evoke that loneliness, heaviness. So it doesn't necessarily matter what your initiating sentence is, but if you have something that has a powerful emotional resonance, then there are shapes that will help you represent that. And so that's what's really cool about composition, is you really get to visit just what shapes are about and how they carry these meanings without us even realizing it. And the more that you practice these sort of abstract compositions, the better you'll be able to use them to your advantage when you're wanting to create a piece that evokes a certain atmosphere. Obviously, these are kind of negative, so maybe it's easier to do that than, let's say, oh, what if I want to do something joyful? But why don't we try one last one just to see how that would work? So let's say my sentence is, I've gotten better at understanding composition. So there's a sense of like levity and growth in there. And I don't totally understand how I'm going to do this, but I'm just going to try something out. So I've gotten better at understanding composition. To me, like I said, it gives me a sense of levity. So like maybe something floating, maybe shapes that are more round. There's some lightness in there. There's some growth. So what if I made these shapes kind of grow towards the right? What if I had something like that? That was like, there's a learning that's happening. So I'm going to keep my shapes kind of round, but they're all kind of similar to this bigger shape, and I'm going to make it even bigger, actually, now that I've added more of them. And to me, there's already something a little bit more joyful about this. What if I wanted to evoke a sense of growth? Maybe this would be more similar to like plants, and so I could have these sort of lines that evoke something that is more similar to growth. And maybe I grow outside of this image. And so do you see how there's something inherently more joyful in this image compared to these ones? And isn't that funny? It's not even leaf shape, but I'm going towards the right. There's a lot of negative space. There's maybe an interesting difference in shape size. And there's these lines which I used, which for all of us will evoke a sense of growth. Plants, something like that. In this case, I made something which is maybe more on the semi-abstract side because, it does more clearly your mind more clearly associates it with something related to nature. But even when you're staying in the completely abstract, you can still have this connection between the mood and the marks that you create. So I really hope that you enjoyed this little exercise. I'd be very curious to hear about your discoveries and how it felt for you to actually represent your inner critic's sentences in a visual form. And there's actually a second kind of beautiful thing that I think happens when we take the time to sit with our inner critic and represent it visually, is that also allows us to actually sit with these sentences, which we have a tendency to kind of brush away, or we want them to not be there. And instead, we can use them to learn something. And we can see that maybe they're not totally as correct as our inner critic believes. You know, you've already, in this exercise, improved on your understanding of composition. And isn't that the beautiful thing? Just by doing a few little thumbnails, taking a little time out of your day, and being creative. Thank you so much for joining in today. I hope that you enjoyed our little foray into composition and the weird connections that I make between composition and other things. Let me know in the comments what you thought. I would love to hear how it went for you and what it brought up. If you enjoy these sorts of videos and would like to see more or just support the channel, please remember to hit like and subscribe and the bell notification to get news of when my next video is out. And of course, if you want more in-depth principles of composition, scan the QR code. And also, if you want to go a little bit more in depth with your art journey and gain access to a lovely, cozy community, please consider joining my Patreon, the Cozy Little Art Cafe, where we do live drawing sessions every month. We actually did an in-depth class on composition also on there last month, and we're diving into a few other things. There will be one session on rocks and cliffs, which is going to be an interesting subject to visit. And we're just about to actually have a live session on how to create personal work while using references. So that's going to be our upcoming sessions. And of course, I always let people vote and talk about what it is that they would want to learn in upcoming months. So please feel free to chime in. And I hope to see you there or here. I'll see you very soon. Can you tell that there is light coming out of the window? It's kind of pretty. Maybe a little distracting. Sorry. Okay, I'll see you around very, very soon.